My sister got the down payment for her house from my parents. Now they're asking me to help pay it off, and then I'm Madison, Maddie to most people. I'm 27, and I've worked really hard to build a life for myself. I've got a solid job as a marketing manager, and while I don't make a ton of money, I'm doing okay. I rent a small apartment, save what I can, and I try to live within my means. Financial responsibility has always been a big deal to me, especially because my parents, Karen and David, always drilled into me how important it was to save for the future, which is why I'm so floored by what I just found out. Let me give you a little context about my family. I have an older sister, Chloe, who's 30 and married to Brandon. They have 2 kids under 5, and Chloe has been a stay-at-home mom since their oldest was born. Brandon, on the other hand, is, well, let's just say he's not the most reliable guy. He works random freelance jobs, tries his hand at side hustles that never go anywhere, and generally seems to coast by. But Chloe is always talking about how happy they are, how family comes first, and how they make it work. I'm genuinely happy for her, or at least I was until now. Earlier this week, I was on the phone with my mom, just catching up. I've been thinking about buying a house in a year or two, so I casually mentioned I'd started saving for a down payment. That's when she hit me with it. Oh, Chloe and Brandon wouldn't have been able to buy their house if we hadn't helped with the down payment, she said, like it was no big deal. My brain short-circuited. What? I asked her what she meant, and she explained, again, like it was the most normal thing in the world, that she and Dad had given Chloe and Brandon $50,000 a couple of years ago so they could buy their house. Let me repeat that, $50,000. My mom explained they had pulled the money out of Dad's 401k and a small savings account they'd been building for years. I knew from experience that withdrawing from retirement accounts early comes with penalties, but apparently, they were so focused on helping Chloe and Brandon that they didn't care about the long-term consequences. I'm not sure what shocked me more, the fact that my parents had that kind of money to throw around, or the fact that they never told me. I mean, they always made it sound like they were scraping by. When I was in college, they told me there was no way they could help me with tuition, so I busted my ass working part-time jobs and took out loans. I've been paying those off ever since. But apparently, 2 years later, they magically found 50 grand lying around? I pressed my mom on where the money came from, and she admitted they'd taken it out of Dad's retirement account. We didn't think it would be a big deal, she said. We figured Chloe and Brandon would pay us back once things stabilized. When I asked why they didn't tell me, my mom got defensive. She said it wasn't something I needed to know, and that Chloe and Brandon needed the help more than I did. She even threw in a line about how, "You don't have kids, Maddie, so it's different." That stung. I've always known Chloe was the favorite, but I didn't realize how far that favoritism went until now. But wait, it gets worse. My parents are retired now, and my dad's health isn't great. They don't have much income outside of Social Security, and my mom let it slip that their savings are basically gone. It turns out they've been using what's left of their retirement fund to help Chloe and Brandon cover their mortgage payments. And now they're in trouble. Big trouble. Cue the real kicker. They want me to step in and help them pay off Chloe's mortgage. I couldn't believe it. I asked why Chloe and Brandon weren't taking care of their own house, and my mom said something about how Brandon's work situation has been unpredictable. And then she hit me with the guilt trip of all guilt trips. You know, Maddie, family helps family. Chloe and Brandon are doing the best they can, but they have 2 little kids to think about. We're all just trying to keep them afloat. When I told her I didn't think I could afford to help, she got even more defensive. We helped you plenty, Maddie. Don't forget that. Let me clarify something here. They didn't help me plenty. Yes, they put a roof over my head and food on the table while I was growing up. Yes, I love them, and I'm grateful for that. But that's the bare minimum, right? The truth is, I've been financially independent since I was 18. Everything I have, I've earned on my own. So to hear my mom act like I owe them for something as basic as parenting, it felt like a slap in the face. The conversation ended with my mom saying, "Just think about it." But I'm still reeling. I called my boyfriend, Liam, afterward, and he was just as shocked as I was. He said I'd be crazy to get involved and that Chloe and Brandon need to take responsibility for their own lives. But he's not in my family, you know? He doesn't understand the guilt trips, the expectation that I'll be the good daughter who steps up when things get hard. And here's the thing. I love my parents. I really do. They've made mistakes, sure, but they've always been there for me in other ways. And Chloe is my sister. I don't want to see her lose her house, especially since my nieces would be affected. But is this really my responsibility? I've been turning this over in my head all week, and the more I think about it, the angrier I get. Chloe and Brandon are grown adults who made their own decisions. If they couldn't afford the house, they shouldn't have bought it. And my parents should have set boundaries instead of bleeding themselves dry to save them. I'm trying to stay calm, but I know I need to have a serious conversation with my parents. I also feel like I need to confront Chloe and Brandon, but I have no idea how to do that without blowing up our entire family dynamic. Am I crazy for feeling this way? How do I even start to navigate this? I called a family meeting. I figured it was the best way to get everyone on the same page, or at least clear the air. I told my parents and my sister, Chloe, that I wanted to talk, and we agreed to meet at my parents' house. I felt sick walking in, knowing this conversation wasn't going to end well. Let me tell you, it did not disappoint. I started off calmly, explaining how blindsided I felt. I told them it hurt that they had helped Chloe with such a massive down payment and never even mentioned it to me. I also laid out how I'd been working my ass off to stay afloat financially, and now they were asking me to step in and clean up someone else's mess. I thought I made a pretty solid case. But, of course, Chloe didn't see it that way. You act like we're just sitting around, Maddie, but you don't understand what it's like to raise kids, she snapped. We needed that help, and Mom and Dad gave it to us because they knew we were in a tough spot. And now they need help, so what's the big deal? Family helps family. I could feel my blood boiling, but I tried to keep it together. I'm not saying you didn't need help, Chloe, I said. I'm saying this whole situation is unfair. If you knew you couldn't afford a house, why did you buy one? And why haven't you and Brandon stepped up now that Mom and Dad are struggling? Chloe rolled her eyes. It's easy for you to sit there and judge when you don't have kids or a mortgage. You don't get it. That's when I turned to my parents. So, what's the plan here? How much do you expect me to give? Because I'm not exactly rolling in cash either. My mom gave me the most heartbreaking look, and for a second, I actually felt bad. We're not asking you to cover everything, Maddie, she said softly. But we thought you could pitch in, maybe $1,000 a month, just until things stabilize. $1,000 a month? Stabilize? I practically choked on the word. What does that even mean? How long are we talking? Months? Years? Forever? My dad jumped in at this point, looking uncomfortable. We just need to get through this rough patch. Chloe and Brandon will get back on their feet soon. I'm sure of it. Now, here's the thing. I would have been more open to helping if I thought this was actually temporary. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Chloe and Brandon weren't struggling because of bad luck. They were struggling because they'd made terrible decisions. And it didn't take long for Brandon to confirm that. He wasn't at the meeting, probably for the best, but later that night, I got a call from him. At first, I thought he might be calling to smooth things over, but no, he was pissed. Look, Maddie, he said, I know you don't agree with how we do things, but this isn't your business. We're doing the best we can, and it's not like we're asking you for money directly. Your parents are asking you to help them. That's between you and them, not us. But it is about you, Brandon, I snapped. You're the reason they're in this mess. Why aren't you stepping up and taking care of your own mortgage? That's when he dropped the bombshell. Brandon hasn't been paying his share of the mortgage for months. Apparently, he's been sinking money into some business venture that just needs a little more time to take off. He wouldn't give me details, but I could tell from the way he was talking that it's one of those sketchy, get-rich-quick schemes. I eventually pieced together that Brandon had sunk money into at least 2 failed ventures in the past year alone. A landscaping company he tried to start with no experience, and some kind of cryptocurrency trading that went south when the market tanked. He'd convinced Chloe they just needed one big break, but it sounded like they were gambling with money they didn't have. I was furious. So let me get this straight, I said. You're gambling on some business idea while my parents drain their retirement fund, and now you think I should step in and cover for you? You don't understand how hard it is, Maddie, he said. You don't have kids. You don't have the pressure we do. That's when I lost it. Stop using your kids as an excuse, Brandon. This isn't about them. It's about you and Chloe refusing to live within your means. And now you expect me to clean up your mess? No, absolutely not. I hung up before he could say anything else. The next day, my mom called to smooth things over, but it just made me feel worse. She mentioned they'd spoken to a financial advisor before taking out the loan, but all the advice seemed to go out the window once they thought about Chloe losing her home. He told us it was risky, she admitted. But what were we supposed to do? Just let her and the girls end up on the street? She admitted she didn't know Brandon had stopped paying his share of the mortgage. She also admitted that their retirement fund was almost completely gone. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked her. I didn't want you to worry, she said, and I thought we could handle it. But now, Maddie, I'm scared. If we can't keep up with the payments, Chloe and Brandon could lose the house. And if that happens, where will the kids go? There it was again. The kids, my sweet little nieces, who didn't ask for any of this. I felt so torn. Part of me wanted to swoop in and save the day, but another part of me was screaming, "This isn't your responsibility." Liam, my boyfriend, has been my rock through all of this. When I told him about the latest developments, he was livid. "Maddie, you have to stop letting them manipulate you," he said. "They're using guilt to make you feel responsible for their bad decisions. But it's not your job to save them." He's right, of course. I know he is. But it's not that simple. If I walk away, I feel like I'm abandoning my family. If I help, I'm enabling their bad behavior. And here's the worst part. I've already given them money. After my mom's call, I felt so guilty that I transferred $2,000 to her account. I told myself it was a one-time thing, just to buy them a little breathing room. But now I'm worried I've opened the floodgates. What if they come back for more? What if this never ends? I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm being pulled in a million different directions, and no matter what I choose, someone is going to get hurt. After I sent the money, my mom texted me constantly, thanking me and calling me her lifesaver. She kept saying things like, "We're so grateful, Maddie. This really saved us this month." This month. It was subtle, but the way she said it made me realize they were already expecting me to step in again next month. And the month after that. I knew I couldn't let this keep happening, so I made a plan to confront Chloe and Brandon directly. I texted Chloe and told her we needed to talk. I wanted to hear their side of things face to face because, frankly, my parents didn't seem to have the full picture of what was going on. Chloe invited me over to their house, and I figured it was the perfect opportunity to get some answers. What I didn't expect was to leave their house feeling like I didn't even know my own sister anymore. When I got there, Chloe was friendly enough at first, but I could tell she was on edge. Brandon, as usual, was nowhere to be seen, which annoyed me. This whole situation revolved around him just as much as it did Chloe, and yet he was conveniently absent. Their house, by the way, was way nicer than I expected. Granite countertops, fancy appliances, and a newly remodeled living room. For a couple who's apparently drowning in debt, they sure weren't living like it. I tried to ease into the conversation. I started by saying that I was concerned about Mom and Dad and wanted to understand how things got to this point. Chloe immediately got defensive. "Maddie, I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this," she said. "Mom and Dad wanted to help us. We didn't force them to do anything." "That's not the point," I said, trying to keep my cool. "The point is, their savings are gone, and now they're asking me to step in and help. Don't you think that's a little unfair?" Chloe sighed and rolled her eyes. "Maddie, you don't get it. Brandon's business is just in a rough patch right now. Things will turn around soon. This is temporary." That's when I decided to cut to the chase. "Chloe, I know Brandon hasn't been paying his share of the mortgage. So where is his money going? And why haven't you stepped in to cover for him?" Her face turned red, and for a moment, I thought she was going to kick me out. But then she surprised me. She got quiet and said, "Fine. You want the truth? We're in way deeper than you think." I asked her what she meant, and that's when the flood of secrets started spilling out. Apparently, their financial problems didn't start with the house. Chloe admitted they were months behind on their mortgage payments, and the $15,000 my parents mentioned was the amount they needed to avoid foreclosure. She said the bank had given them a grace period to catch up, but if they didn't pay it soon, the foreclosure process would officially begin. I'd read somewhere that foreclosure laws vary by state, But the way Chloe was talking made it sound like they were hanging by a thread. Chloe and Brandon had already been struggling with credit card debt when they got married, and instead of tackling it, they ignored it and kept spending. By the time they decided to buy a house, they were already tens of thousands of dollars in debt. But instead of holding off and trying to get their finances under control, they convinced my parents to help with the down payment. "It's not like we lied to them," Chloe said, as if that made it better. "They knew we had some debt, but we figured we'd be able to pay it all off once Brandon's business took off." Only, Brandon's business never took off. He's apparently tried and failed at multiple ventures over the past few years, sinking thousands of dollars into each one. Chloe admitted she hasn't been keeping track of how much he's lost because it stresses her out too much to think about. "Do you have any idea how irresponsible that sounds?" I asked her, my voice rising despite myself. "You're living way beyond your means, and now you're dragging Mom and Dad, and me, down with you." Chloe got defensive again. "It's not like we planned for this to happen, Maddie. We're doing the best we can. And for the record, it's not your money that's bailing us out. It's Mom and Dad's. That's the problem." I snapped. "Their savings are gone, Chloe. Gone. They're risking their retirement because of you and Brandon, and now they're expecting me to fix it. Do you not see how insane that is?" She just sat there in silence for a moment, and I could see the guilt creeping into her face. But then, as if she'd flipped a switch, she said, "You're so judgmental, Maddie. Just because you don't have kids or a mortgage doesn't mean you know everything. Life is hard. Okay? You don't know what it's like to be in our shoes." I wanted to scream. It felt like every conversation I had with Chloe ended with her using her kids as a shield, and I was so sick of it. I told her I was done with the excuses, and that if she didn't start taking responsibility for her situation, things were going to get even worse. She didn't respond, so I left. The next day, I sat down with my parents to try to untangle the mess. I told them everything Chloe had admitted to me, but they didn't seem as shocked as I thought they'd be. My mom said, "We knew things were tight for them, but we didn't realize it was this bad." My dad, on the other hand, looked like he was about to have a meltdown. "I told you we shouldn't have given them that money," he muttered to my mom. "I told you this would happen." It was the first time I'd ever heard him criticize Chloe, and I could tell it hurt my mom to hear it. I asked them point blank if they were planning to keep helping Chloe and Brandon, and my mom looked me in the eye and said, "What choice do we have? They're our children." That's when I realized the full extent of the problem. My parents weren't just financially enabling Chloe and Brandon. They were emotionally enabling them, too. They couldn't say no because they felt like it was their job to keep rescuing them, no matter the cost. But here's the kicker. My mom admitted they were considering taking out a second mortgage on their house to keep helping Chloe. When I pushed for details, she told me the bank had approved them because their house was nearly paid off, giving them a lot of equity to borrow against. But I couldn't believe they'd willingly put their home at risk when they were already living on a fixed income. Didn't the bank question how they planned to repay it? My mom brushed me off, saying, "They just looked at the equity. It wasn't that hard." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious?" I asked. "You're willing to put yourselves at risk of losing your own home to bail them out? Do you not see how insane that is?" My mom got defensive, of course. "It's not that simple, Maddie. You don't understand what it's like to see your child struggle." "And what about me?" I asked, tears welling up in my eyes. "Do you understand what it's like to feel like you're only valued as a backup plan? To feel like I'm just here to clean up everyone else's mess?" That's when my dad stepped in. "Maddie, we don't want to put this on you, but we're in too deep. We don't know what else to do." After my conversation with Chloe and my parents, I made a decision. I wasn't going to give them another cent. I knew if I caved even once more, it would never stop. My boyfriend, Liam, was really supportive and kept reminding me that it's not my responsibility to fix this mess. "You've worked so hard to get where you are," he said. "Don't let them drag you down." He's right, of course. But logic doesn't stop the guilt. Every time I look at my phone, there's a text from my mom reminding me about Chloe's kids or a message from Chloe implying I'm being selfish. I've lost count of how many times I've heard the phrase, "family helps family." But here's the thing. Family also doesn't take advantage of you. That's what I keep telling myself, even as they ramp up the pressure. Last week, my mom called and said they needed to talk. Urgently. She sounded frantic, so I agreed to meet them at their house. When I got there, my dad looked exhausted, and my mom was pacing like a nervous wreck. Chloe and Brandon weren't there, which I was grateful for because I didn't think I could handle seeing them without losing my cool. That's when my mom dropped the latest bombshell. They were officially out of money. "We've already missed one of Chloe's mortgage payments," my mom said, wringing her hands. "And the bank is threatening to foreclose if we don't catch up. We need $15,000 to get them back on track." My jaw dropped. $15,000? Are you kidding me? I told them, point blank, that I didn't have that kind of money lying around. And even if I did, I wouldn't give it to them. That's when my mom started crying. "Maddie, please," she begged. "We don't know what else to do. If the bank takes the house, Chloe and the kids will have nowhere to go. And what will people think of us if we let that happen? We'll be the parents who let their daughter lose her home." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were more worried about what the neighbors would think than about the fact that they were putting their entire financial future, and mine, in jeopardy. My mom got emotional and said, "You don't understand, Maddie. It's not just about Chloe. It's about the girls. We couldn't forgive ourselves if they ended up in a bad neighborhood or in some rental where they'd have to move every year. Kids need stability." "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But this isn't my problem to solve. You and Dad need to stop throwing money at Chloe and Brandon. They need to figure this out for themselves." My dad, who'd been silent up until that point, finally spoke up. "Maddie's right," he said. "We can't keep doing this. We've already put everything on the line, and it's still not enough. Maybe it's time for Chloe and Brandon to sell the house and downsize." My mom looked at him like he'd grown a second head. "David, we can't just abandon them like that. What about the kids? You're willing to let our granddaughters end up homeless?" "They won't be homeless, Karen," my dad said firmly. "They'll just have to live somewhere they can actually afford." My mom burst into tears again, and I could see the guilt eating away at my dad. But I felt a small flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see reason. That flicker didn't last long. The next day, Chloe called me in a rage. "What the hell, Maddie?" she yelled. "Did you seriously tell Mom and Dad to stop helping us? Do you have any idea what kind of stress that's putting on us right now?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Chloe, I didn't tell them to stop helping you. I told them they need to stop sacrificing their own financial future for yours. There's a difference." "Oh, give me a break," she snapped. "You don't care about Mom and Dad's future. You just don't want to help. Admit it. You've always been jealous of me." Jealous? That was it. I completely lost it. "Jealous of what, Chloe?" I shouted. "Jealous that you've spent your entire adult life mooching off Mom and Dad while I've worked my ass off to take care of myself? Jealous that you've made one bad decision after another and expect everyone else to clean up your mess? Yeah, sure, I'm so jealous." She started crying, which only made me angrier. "You don't get it, Maddie," she said through tears. "We're doing the best we can. Brandon is trying so hard to make things work, but it's not easy. And now you want us to lose our house? How could you be so heartless?" I couldn't take it anymore. "I'm not the one making you lose your house, Chloe. You and Brandon are doing that all on your own. You've been living way beyond your means for years, and now the rest of us are paying the price. Well, guess what? I'm done. I'm not bailing you out. Not now, not ever." I hung up before she could say anything else. That night, I got a call from my mom. She was crying again and begged me to reconsider. "Please, Maddie," she said. "We just need a little more time to get things under control. If you could help us cover this payment, I promise it'll be the last time." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I knew it was a lie. This wasn't going to be the last time. It was never going to stop. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, "but I can't keep doing this. I need to take care of myself." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then she said, "I don't know who you are anymore, Maddie." That one hurt. A lot. But I didn't back down. Since then, things have been tense. My parents are barely speaking to me. Chloe is furious, and Brandon is apparently telling anyone who will listen that I'm selfish and ungrateful. Even Liam thinks I should take a step back from the drama for my own sanity. "You've done everything you can, Maddie," he said. Now it's on them. He's right. But it still feels awful. I love my family, and I hate that things have come to this. But I also know I can't keep sacrificing my own future to clean up their mess. I've spent my entire life being the responsible one, and all it's gotten me is resentment and guilt. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. My parents are still talking about taking out a second mortgage, and Chloe is still clinging to the idea that Brandon's business will magically save them. Meanwhile, I'm trying to focus on myself and figure out how to let go of the guilt. How do you walk away from a mess like this without feeling like a terrible person? How do you protect yourself when it feels like your entire family is against you? After the explosive conversations with my parents and Chloe, I decided to stick to my guns. I wasn't going to give them any more money. I didn't reach this decision lightly, but I realized I couldn't keep setting myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. Liam, my boyfriend, has been reminding me of this over and over. You can't save people who don't want to save themselves. I knew he was right, but cutting them off emotionally was much harder than cutting them off financially. My parents' second mortgage plan moved ahead despite my protests. I tried one last time to convince them not to go through with it, but my mom was adamant. We don't have a choice, Maddie, she said. We can't let Chloe and the girls lose their home. You wouldn't understand because you're not a mother. That line stung more than I'd like to admit. I don't know why my mom keeps bringing up the fact that I don't have kids, as if that makes me less capable of understanding responsibility or compassion. I think it's just her way of dismissing me whenever I try to challenge her choices. The day after they finalized the second mortgage, Chloe called me. I didn't want to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. She didn't even try to hide her gloating. Mom and Dad are lifesavers, she said. We're finally caught up on the mortgage and Brandon's business is starting to pick up. Everything's going to be fine now. Chloe, I said, trying to stay calm. Do you hear yourself? They've put their home at risk, their home, to save yours. That's not something to celebrate. Oh, come on, Maddie, she said with a laugh. They're not going to lose their house. You're so dramatic. I couldn't believe how cavalier she was being. You know what, Chloe? I hope you're right. I hope Brandon's business takes off and everything works out. But I can't keep doing this with you. I can't be the backup plan when everything inevitably falls apart again. She got defensive, of course. You're so selfish, Maddie. All you ever think about is yourself. That's when I decided I was done. No more explanations, no more trying to justify myself. I told her, think whatever you want, Chloe. But from now on, I'm focusing on myself. Don't call me again unless it's to take responsibility for your own mess. And then I hung up. I wish I could tell you that things magically got better after that, but they didn't. In fact, they got worse. About a week later, my dad called me and asked if I'd come over for dinner. I hesitated, but I could tell from his tone that something was wrong, so I agreed. When I got there, my mom wouldn't even look me in the eye. My dad sat me down and told me that things were worse than they'd let on. They were already struggling to make the payments on the second mortgage. I wasn't surprised, but it still made my stomach sink. My dad admitted that my mom had been pressuring him to ask me for more money, but he refused. I told her we've already asked too much of you, he said. It's not fair. I could see how tired he was, physically, emotionally, financially. For the first time in this whole ordeal, I felt like he understood where I was coming from. But then he said something that broke my heart. Maddie, I think we're going to have to sell the house. It was like a punch to the gut. This was the house I'd grown up in. The house where we'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays, where I'd cried over breakups and laughed until my stomach hurt. And now, because of Chloe and Brandon, my parents were going to lose it. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to offer to help, to do whatever I could to save the house. But I knew that would only prolong the inevitable. They'd dig themselves into a deeper hole, and I'd get dragged down with them. So I stayed quiet. The fallout from that conversation was huge. My mom blamed me, of course. She said if I had just stepped up like a good daughter, none of this would have happened. Chloe, predictably, called me a monster. She said I was tearing the family apart and that I should be ashamed of myself. Brandon even sent me a passive-aggressive text saying, "Thanks for abandoning your family when they needed you most." It was like a coordinated attack, but I didn't budge. A few days later, Liam and I were having dinner, and I just broke down. I told him how guilty I felt, how I couldn't stop replaying my mom's words in my head. What if she's right? I asked him through tears. What if I really am selfish? Liam put his fork down and looked me in the eye. Maddie, your mom and Chloe are manipulating you. You're not selfish. You've been carrying this family on your back for years, and it's time to let them carry their own weight. They made these choices, not you. It was exactly what I needed to hear. I decided then and there to go low contact with my family. I couldn't keep subjecting myself to their toxicity. I sent my parents a message explaining my decision and told them I loved them but needed space. My mom didn't reply. My dad said he understood. Fast forward a few weeks. My parents officially sold their house. Hayes sold it for less than they'd hoped, but thankfully it was enough to pay off the second mortgage and still leave them with a small nest egg. They moved into a 2-bedroom condo nearby, which is much smaller but at least affordable on their limited income. My dad said it felt strange not to live in the house they'd had for 30 years, but he admitted it was a relief not to have the financial pressure hanging over them anymore. It was heartbreaking, but I think it was the wake-up call they needed. They moved into a smaller place that they can actually afford, and my dad has started talking about getting a part-time job to supplement their income. I'm cautiously optimistic that they're starting to take responsibility for their own situation. As for Chloe and Brandon, they're still in their house for now. Brandon's business hasn't taken off, and I've heard through the grapevine that they're behind on their mortgage again. I've stayed true to my word and haven't bailed them out. It's hard, especially when I think about my nieces, but I know it's the right thing to do. I've been spending a lot of time reflecting on everything that's happened, and here's what I've realized. Setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. It makes you strong. For years, I let my family guilt me into thinking I owed them something, but I've finally learned that love isn't about sacrifice. It's about respect. And if they can't respect me, then I have to respect myself enough to walk away. It's been a painful journey, but I'm starting to feel like I can breathe again. I'm focusing on my career, my relationship with Liam, and my own financial goals. I don't know what the future holds for my family, but for now, I'm at peace with my decision.